Good afternoon, blessings, and Haragani. That's a Swahili word for how are you?
Yes, yes.
I truly thank God for this opportunity to bring you knowledge. You know, that we are in so need of. Hosea 4:6 said, my people will perish for lack of knowledge. Now, and I take that to mean true knowledge because we get a lot of knowledge. We need true knowledge, though, you know. That's why I'm encouraged, though, by the quote by the late Dr. Martin Luther King when he says, truth crushed to the earth will rise again. And if I can contribute any way to that truth, let me be a gatekeeper or watchman, and that scripture also. Now, I thank my crew, my producers, Lula Williams Salvador, Sheila Brown Bird, and my advisor, Juanita McClure,
Yes.
my promo crew, Salim and Elijah, and I think my engineer here who just keeps this thing on target for us, Norm.
Yes.
And, of course, my co-host, the eminent Professor Terry Benjamin.
Hey, glad to be here. Glad to be
Yeah,
here with
you know, Terry, today is Veteran Day.
Yes.
And, you know, I learned that the origin of this day came from African Americans who celebrated the first such occasion, you know, the 1800s. Of course, as most things here in America, if not everything, was invented by the Africans. But that's for another day, so we'll talk about that another day.
That's right.
But now I want to recognize a few brave souls from my family who were and are still given to this country. My brothers, Kerry, call him Bubba, Haywood, call him Stowe, Eugene, call him Gene, Alex, another Bubba, and my son, Walter, Sabir, my grands, Shaka, Sharon Samori, my nephews, Tillis, Lamar, Dawan, Nasir, happy birthday, Nasir, his birthday is today, and Lagamont, we call him Nutty. He's a beautiful person. Again, Shaka, Nasir. Well, no, these three, Shaka, Nasir, and Lagamont, are still in service. And special thanks to three cousins who received the Medal of Honor. Alwyn C. Cash, Charles Talley Sr., and Lamont Williams. You know, may God continue favors upon each one of you, and thank you so much for your service. You know, though, the month of May is Mental Health Awareness Month.
That's right. That's right.
And I've been alerted to how mental health is wreaking havoc amongst our young population, and that's a segment of our population that sometimes gets ignored, even by us.
You're so right.
But it's no fault of ours, and you know, not deliberately done, but by default. Well, our guest today will be talking about mental health in general. But as you all are aware, this podcast concentrates on our community specifically. And I make that distinction because the ills of our community come from a distinct place.
That's right.
And that's slavery.
Yes.
Now you must ask, how so? Well, that's why we bring on those experts, you know, with specific knowledge of this phenomenon, who have studied extensively in the areas that most impact our lives.
That's right. That's right.
The diaspora African. We've got to be crystal clear that it's just not par for the course.
Yes.
It's just not just another incident. No. So when we talk about ourselves specifically, we do that with the understanding that ours is specific,
It's unique.
unique
Yes.
to the situation, and that's why we need unique attention. So we do that, and we're going to bring these folks on
Oh, yes.
as we come along, you know. So even, Terry, even as we talk about slavery, as slavery goes, there are a lot of groups, people who were enslaved, but what distinguishes ours is, number one, the stripping, the annihilation of one's purpose.
That's right.
Our religion, our culture, our history, our language. And the number two, the inhumane level of abuse, rape, hanging, burning, forcing you to watch it. Watch all this.
It's terrible.
Now I'm going to make that clarification because when I emphasize our mental health, sometimes people assume that I think every other group is exempted. No. Ours is just unique.
Yeah.
Ours is just unique. Listen, there has to be some mental dynamic behind racism and white supremacy.
That's right. It has to be.
And the late Dr. Francis Cress Welsing says that racism and white supremacy are one of the same. They're two of the same.
Okay. Wow.
But see, I don't know. I'm just an amateur. But taking care of our situation might just help them too.
Yes, it might.
Yeah. That's not the objective, however.
Right.
But may just be the result.
Yes,
we have always been the quote saviors,
always.
by accident or otherwise,
Yes,
to save this nation.
That's right.
And speaking of saving, y'all know I have made it clear that my objective here is to participate in saving our race, reclaiming our authenticity,
We have to do that.
our original self. And I suggest it will require three elements. I always say that. Going to require three elements working in concert with each other.
Elements, yes.
Yeah, number one, faith-based. Those who believe and know that there is a force greater than any of us.
Yes.
The I am. And number two, the historian.
That's right.
Who understands and knows the human beginning, and more specifically, the African Cubalon, who are the original human beings,
Yes.
and the significance of that. Not to gloat or anything, but to bring us back to God,
That's right.
our Father. And number three, the mental health professional, the psychologist who can connect the dots
Yes.
of how a mind can become so disoriented.
That's right.
Because without the three, we're just going to be whistling in the wind. Continue to whistle in the wind. Now, another one of my favorite all-time expressions, and that's from my mother and both my parents. They used to say that all the time.
Yes.
But now there's a book by John Gatney, I think his name is, written in the 80s called Dry Long So. You young folk may not have heard of it, but it's a book of expression. And this book is to African Americans, American oral history, as blues, jazz, and gospel are to black music.
Okay.
So if you can, pick it up. But let's get with it today. I am excited. My church, First Baptist Church of Lincoln Garden in Somerset, New Jersey, under the leadership of Dr. Dante Quick, is really bringing the congregation into the 21st century. The black church has always been the go-to for our community.
Always.
But we just got a little lost over time, a little away from it.
But we're still here, though.
Yeah, but we are coming back.
That's right.
Dr. Quick had brought a mental health ministry to First Baptist. And my guest today is the Reverend Kamara Bird McAllister, Director of Mental Health and Pastoral Care. Now, Terry will read the bio, and we will ask our guests some questions.
Okay, first of all, I just want to welcome you.
Thank you so much for having me.
It is the greatest pleasure to read a little bit about you.
Okay.
Reverend Kamara Bird McAllister, a native of New Jersey, currently serves as Morris Brown AME Church in Philadelphia, PA, where her husband, the Reverend Brian S. McAllister, is the pastor. Reverend Kamara was ordained as an interim elder in the American Methodist Episcopal Church by Bishop Julius Harrison McAllister. current presiding prelate of the First Episcopal District of the AME Church in 2022. Reverend Kamaria also has had the privilege of serving at First Baptist Church of Lincoln Gardens since 2020, initially serving as an intern and was recently hired to serve as the director of mental health and pastoral care for First Baptist Church of Lincoln Gardens. Reverend Kamaria graduated with a certificate in Black Church Studies from Princeton Theological Seminary in 2022. While a student, she was awarded the George E. Sweezy Award for Excellence in Homiletics by Princeton Theological Seminary in 2021. In 2023, Reverend Kamaria completed the second half of her dual degree program at Rutgers University School of Social Work and received her MSW. In addition to ministry, Reverend Kamaria has a deep passion for mental health and working with communities, especially youth, that live along the margins. Before attending seminary, she worked at the CARES program at St. Francis Medical Center in Trenton, New Jersey as their lead counselor, outreach coordinator, and handle care trainer for almost 10 years. The CARES program is a partial hospitalization program for children ages 3 to 15 with emotional and behavioral challenges. As their outreach coordinator, she provided positive behavior support training for local school districts and Head Start programs. She recently received her LSW exam in the state of passed her LSW exam in the state of New Jersey and hopes to begin providing clinical counseling under the clinical supervision soon. Reverend Kamaria received a bachelor's degree from the College of New Jersey and a master's degree in organizational leadership and counseling-related services from Rider University. She is also the proud mother of a resilient 1-year-old named Mariah. Considering all of her achievements, her number one aspiration is to please God. As Jesus said, "For I have not come down from heaven and not to do my will, but to do the will of him who sent me." And this is John 6:38. And we thank you for being with us, Reverend Kamaria Bird McAllister.
Yes,
Thanks
thank
so
you
much for
so much.
having
I've been
me.
looking forward to this all
And
week.
it's Reverend Kamaria.
Kamaria, okay.
Kamaria, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
I've been looking forward to this all week. Now, what we do with our guests, we kind of let them give us some up on their personal. How do you get into it? When did you get into it? What motivated you? Give us some of that, and
Yeah.
then we're going to ask you some other questions.
Yeah, so again, thank you all so much for having me. This is actually my first podcast, so I'm excited to be
Congratulations.
Oh, we're honored.
Yes.
This is a historic moment for me in my life.
Okay.
wow.
So I'm just excited
Thank
to be
you.
here. But so I got interested in mental health a little bit before I got interested. Well, I guess it's been a nice marriage of mental health and ministry.
Okay.
So I first began really working with children in the Boys and Girls Club of Trenton and Mercer County. I used to, as you said in the bio, I used to work at the CARES program. But before that, I worked with Boys and Girls Club. And when I was there, I was working with children and, kind of doing like homework help and all of these things. And I really, really enjoyed it. But as time went on, I realized that they needed more. And that is due to some of the difficulties that they were going through while also being a student. And then I got introduced to the CARES program, which stands for Children Are Really Extra Special.
Oh, I like that.
And so that again is in Trenton, New Jersey. And that is for children with emotional and behavioral challenges. And so that was my first experience really in more of a clinical setting. And I was able to assist children there. And then obviously I realized because I didn't have the schooling, I could only help but so much. And also, unfortunately, many of my colleagues in that area didn't necessarily look like the population that we were working with. We worked with mostly young Black boys. I mean, there was some girls too, but it was predominantly African American. And unfortunately, many of the clinicians were white women. And so I felt led and called that I needed to do this work in addition of being called to ministry. And I was I was praying about it and talking to God, like, how can I do both? Like, I don't think I could do both. How can I do both? But, God always works things
Oh,
out. And so
yes.
I was
Always,
able
always.
to find out about Princeton Theological Seminary, and they have a dual program because they do realize the importance and the significance of having people biblically trained, but also trained in social work. So I came out of their dual degree program for the Master's of Divinity and the Master's of Social Work through Rutgers University. And so that's kind of how that came to be. And then throughout my entire journey, I in school, as far as the Princeton Theological Seminary in Rutgers, I've been at First Baptist because praise God that First Baptist is so large. They
Yeah.
have so many things going on
So
there.
many
While I
missions.
was doing my pastoral internship, they already had social workers that could help me to do my field ed there. And so I'm just so excited and blessed. As you said in the bio, that I just recently was hired as a director of mental health and pastoral care.
Yeah.
And that wasn't a position that was there before, although they have done a lot of mental health work prior.
Right.
This position, I believe, is new. And so I'm just excited to see what God is going to do in this space.
Right.
And Pastor Quick has given me a lot of freedom to try to see about how we can better support our community. And I think it's really important too, when I look at, when I look at supporting people through mental illness, I look at it through a holistic approach, right? So
Right.
you can provide mental health treatment, but for those of us that are believers, it's important that we also help people navigate, well, what does God have to say about this? And what is your theological framework around, the fact that maybe you have depression or that you have schizophrenia or any of these different things? And so I always tell people, while, I connect them with clinical therapists, I also, if they're believers, I also encourage them to get involved in ministry. Also, pastoral care is helpful. Pastoral care is not a clinical service, but it's more a way of helping you to navigate life from a theological framework and from a faith lens. But so, yeah, I'm just super excited to see what we can do, especially in a faith-based space,
Right.
as far as mental health, because um, our, I do think that Christianity and our faith sometimes can also contribute to the stigma that is already, prevalent in our community around mental health.
Right.
But so that's kind of my little spiel about how I got here and what I'm looking forward
Well,
to
that is
do.
so
That's great.
that
It's
that-
inspiring.
yeah, very inspiring, and
Yes.
because it connects so clearly with what we're trying to do
No
here.
doubt about it.
You, I don't know if
Yeah.
you was listening when we made I introduced our intent again by saying that I truly believe those are the elements that's going to bring us back to where we need to be as African people.
right.
That faith-based person. We're faith-based believers. We
Yes.
we believe.
Mhm.
There's no doubt about that. We as African people, that's we do believe. Although they stole our religion, we believe anyway. But faith-based and the history, we got to know from when we were from whom we came and from where we came.
That's right. That's
And
right.
we're knowing more and more each day that we are the original people God created
Yes.
first in this universe.
That's right. Right.
So once you know that, then you have a different frame of reference about who you are and to whom you belong to. And then the third one is the psychologist, the mental health professional, because there's no doubt that if we have gone through what we have gone through, and it's nothing, it's unique.
That's right. It is.
There have been other type of slavery. That's why I want to redefine that word. I'm trying to get a word that's going to fit what we went through, because it was obvious it was not the slavery that we talk about or read about, or even if you think of biblical slavery with Moses and that, it was not the kind that was created in the Americas here. So there's a different thing there, the genocide, and there's a word that the sister came up with, Ma'afa, which fits kind of
This would be
nicely,
better, yeah.
but we need to be, the average one of us need to kind of know that.
Yes,
We need to know that there's something uniquely different about what we went through that going to require unique solutions.
Yes, right. That's
So
what
when
it's
I
about.
say our people who are now going into mental health, the study of us as people
Yes.
who have come out of a certain situation,
Yes.
and our faith-based people, and also our historians. It's gonna come together, and it's gonna be an eye opener and an awakening for the ones of us who think everything that we see about ourselves, the negative, particularly, that we created it. That's just not so.
No,
Where
it's
we
not.
need our people like you, and particularly the younger ones who can reach and can understand that
That's important. That's
that is
important.
very important for us to get there.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I'm so glad. I am just pleased, and I feel so good that what we're looking at in today's time, in terms of our people connecting with the seriousness of what we have gone through
Yes, yes.
by doing just what Dr. Quick is doing.
Yeah.
He's bringing a lot of ministries in. There was always there,
Yeah.
but he's bringing an additional way of thinking about who we were and how we can get to where we should be.
Well, that's important, and that's why it's so good to have you with us to help us sort of navigate this situation.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because I'm reading this book here, and this is a book called The Invisible Ache by Courtney B. Vance and Dr. Robin Smith. And they talk about some of the things that you talked about. And what they suggest, and I found this sort of fascinating and sort of shocking, it talks about the other pandemic. And in the book it says here, COVID-19 shut the world down. Well, there was another pandemic that merits urgent attention, the mental health crises leading to rising rates of depression and anxiety among black boys and men. Major depressive episodes with severe impairment among young black men between the ages of 18 and 25 rose from 2.5% in 2015 to 4.3% in 2018, according to the 2018 National Survey on Drug Use and Health by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. Reverend, is this surprising to you?
No,
Yeah.
it's not. It's not surprising.
I
at
thought
all.
you would say that.
I'm not surprised at all. Um, so while I found a couple of studies and statistics, and while, and this was, these studies were back in 2021. So it's, after the 2020 pandemic.
Yes,
Well, not after the pandemic, but I mean, when we were introduced to it.
yes.
So it kind of falls in line to what the book was saying. But in 2021, they noticed that the suicide rate had decreased, but it had increased in African Americans. And so, for instance, like right now, 19 million Americans struggle with depression, and the Black community is overrepresented in that number. Studies also report that African Americans are 20% more likely to have serious psychological distress than whites. A report in 2021 showed that while the suicide rate decreased in the United States, it had increased in the Black community, which is what I said. And then also our children are also suffering with mental illness at disproportionate rates.
Exactly.
In 2021, suicide was the third leading cause of death for African American ages 10 through 24 and for African American men. Black children ages 5 through 12 are twice as likely to die by suicide than their white peers. The Black teen suicide rate has steadily increased by 78% within the last 20 years, which is a crisis, which is startling. And Black students have a higher rate of suicide attempts. And then when I was looking at the reason why, some of the researchers and scholars in this field were saying that they believe that it may be due to the fact of the ACEs, which is adverse childhood experiences, which would include things like child abuse or witnessing some violence or things like that, and that our children are overly represented in those environments where those ACEs occur. And also feelings of discrimination, kind of what you were talking about, feelings of discrimination can occur as young as 6, meaning that a child as young as 6 can really understand that they're, wait a minute, like, can understand the fact that they are being discriminated
Yes.
against, which is
That's
obviously going
sad.
to impact your
Of
emotional
course,
and
of course.
psychological well-being.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And so, yeah, the rates are startling.
Yeah,
And
I was totally
unfortunately, when
shocked.
people, I mean, I was going to talk about this whenever you had asked about it too,
Uh-huh.
but I'm kind of jumping all over the
That's
place a
okay.
little
Go
bit.
That's
on.
okay.
But
Go on.
I'm learning.
We're,
I'm
we're
telling
but
following
you.
you. Yeah.
but also part of the issue too is that our people are underrepresented in the research and in the studies. So
Exactly.
like for instance, when they started doing kind of family therapy,
Mm-hmm.
that's why one of the members of First Baptist Church is so prominent and pivotal, Dr. Nancy Boyd Franklin, because she noticed that the family therapy treatment was
Mm-hmm.
catered to white middle class families
Oh, and oh,
See
and
that?
did not
Oh my
include,
goodness! Wow.
you know,
mhm.
African Americans.
Yeah, and never
Um,
has. See what happened with us, and not to interrupt, but you're on point there. We got to always understand that I was shocked when I heard the statistics on our young people committing suicide.
Yeah, yeah.
Because as well as I think I'm trying to know
Yeah, yeah. Of
the
course, of
situation,
course. Yeah.
I thought that that was not prominent or even prevalent in our community
Yeah, yeah.
for a
I
long
understand.
time
Yeah,
until
yeah,
I
yeah.
started hearing about it.
Right, right.
But that's because we've not been studied.
Yeah, we
And in
haven't.
whatever had happened to us was not
Yeah,
categorized
yeah,
as
yeah, yeah.
what it should have been.
Yeah, yeah.
Without people coming out like what you're doing, Dr. Bird, that I forget the Camara. That what you're coming out with is informing us.
Yeah,
It's
that's-
informing us
it-
of
it's
something that
important.
we just never thought about or never connected to.
That's right. That's
But
right.
the bottom line is, as you said, much of the study that's have been done has not been done for us anyway.
That's
So
right,
now
that's
that
right.
our people, and there's a percentage of them that, we know we need more of our
We
people
do.
into this
We
field.
do.
And I think that's going to happen now that we begin to understand mental health in a different way.
Yeah.
See, we kind of poo-pooed it for a while because we didn't want to associate. As a matter of fact, as Pastor said the other day, sometimes we associate being mental with the word crazy.
That's right. Yeah.
Nothing to do with that.
That's the
You
stigma.
have two different parts of
Yeah.
your body. One is mental and one is physical.
right.
And
That's
if
right.
you're serious about, if you know about your physical being, then you must know that there's a combination of, there's a comparison to what your mental side of the
Yeah.
your body
Yeah.
needs attention to.
But again, I think you would agree that when we talk about our mental health, that's really a aspect of our self care. We take care of
Yeah.
the physical, and the mental. And again, I think what's happening right now is getting a little more personal, because this book that I mentioned was really inspired by Courtney B. Vance, just relating publicly that his father had committed suicide. And then his godson had committed suicide. And of course, he went into therapy, and him and Dr. Robin Smith came out with this particular book. I think a lot of times we have problems, but if we don't talk about them, if we don't get them out into the open, they'll be buried to the point where we will do ourselves self-harm, because we believe that it's too, like Ruby said, it's a stigma, and we're ashamed. We're ashamed to admit that we need therapy.
So Reverend Bird, could I call you Reverend Bird rather than
Yeah,
try to mess up your name?
or Reverend K, if that's
Reverend K, that's how they were
Thank
there.
you.
Reverend K, thank you. Should we see mental health as serious as our physical health, and why? What?
Yes.
That's a good question.
Yes,
Good
yes,
question.
yes,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
should.
Uh-huh.
You should definitely see mental health as serious as your physical health, because untreated mental health can have just as much, if not more, in some instances, of detrimental results for your life and your
Yes,
quality
yes,
of life.
yes, yes.
And also, too, a part that I think people don't realize is that mental illness impacts how we think, feel, and act.
That's right,
And
that's right.
it can also impact our physical bodies and our physical health,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So an example would be depression is linked to diabetes,
Oh, wow.
heart disease, and stroke. And vice versa, right? And I tell people this too, if you have, and there are studies out there, medical studies that show that if you feel better,
Mhm, mhm.
if you can kind of be more in a positive state of mind, that can help in your physical body healing more.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes, yes.
Um, and
That
so a lot
makes
of
sense.
times when they have, patients with different diseases and stuff, they also look at their emotional well-being because they understand the impact that your emotional well-being can have on your physical health. And so
Right.
even I believe they had brought this up before in a program that I had the week before, but there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score.
Oh,
But it's
well.
just understanding that sometimes, stress,
Mm-hmm.
like if you go to like if you go get a massage or something, like if you're stressed, they can
Mhm.
feel the fact that that you're
Oh,
tense
really?
up
Yeah, yeah,
here.
Yeah.
yes,
It can seep in your
yes,
bodies and
yes.
people don't
Right.
realize
Of
that.
course,
Right.
of course.
Um, and then also too in relation to how our biology and our minds connect, is the fact that our emotions are also can be regulated by our brains
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
and the
mm-hmm.
neurotransmitters in our brains,
Of course,
and
of course.
which is why medication, although people it can be very scary for some people, and I completely understand that,
Yes,
but
yes, yeah.
like depression, anxiety, and all of those things that can be a result of a chemical imbalance, which meaning,
Wow.
so like for instance, serotonin is a neurotransmitter um, that impacts your learning, your memory, and the way that you feel, right? It also regulates your body temperature, your happiness, your sleep, your
Mm-hmm.
appetite, all
Of
of
course,
that
all of
stuff.
that.
And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
some people, their biological makeup they can have low serotonin levels. So not necessarily because of anything, but that's just how their mind is. And so they'll give you medication
Mm-hmm.
to raise those levels up to again to give you a better quality of life. So
Yeah.
sometimes people say, "Oh, you just need to be strong enough," right?
Yeah.
Right.
But
Yeah, just
sometimes
tough
it's
it out, yeah.
deeper than is it can sometimes be deeper than just your willpower.
Yeah.
It could just be your biological makeup and the imbalances in your brain. So
Right.
that's how medication can come involved in when you
Yeah.
talk about treatment.
Right.
That's not always the case. And if you
Mm-hmm.
start medication, you don't necessarily have to be on it the rest of your life, but they can help to balance you out a little bit more.
Right. Right.
That's
Right.
right.
Since
But it's all connected. Our
yeah.
mind, bodies, our
This
spirits,
is
Yeah,
it's
it's
all
holistic. This
connected.
is
And
holistic,
if
yeah.
they be affected,
Mm-hmm.
impacted on from different times and different places, and it's sort of a lot of it is, well, I don't know about hereditary. Let me get off of that one.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
from where
yeah.
I can discern,
Yeah, yeah.
it
Yeah.
seems that much of what's happening with us comes from a point.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Everything does. So
That's
this
right.
comes
That's
from a
right.
point of slavery. Let me just ask you, statistics show that you mentioned it too, how we are disproportionate in health, wealth, and education. Should we contribute that to our experience from slavery? And I say that because this podcast kind of connect all our issues
That's right. That's right.
Mhm.
from a point, and that point that I talk about is slavery because I know that the what we went through in that period. And I again say I would like to call it something else, but for lack of a better term, we'll
Mm-hmm.
say slavery. We were enslaved.
That's
We
right.
went through so tremendous situations that no one else had ever been through. And I have a feeling that what we are looking at now, all the
Mm-hmm.
syndromes or
Mm-hmm.
whatever that have come upon us,
Yes, yes.
have come from that point.
Yeah.
We're not that much different from any other human being that we are so disproportionate behind
Yeah, yeah.
everybody when we understand that we as African having come over here,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and the records or our history
Mm-hmm.
of
Mm-hmm.
us as African people have been at the top of the heap.
Yes, yes.
So we're at the bottom of the heap now. So how can we explain that
Yeah.
in terms of our
Yeah.
people beginning to uh, stop pointing fingers at themselves in
Mhm.
terms of feeling that they are the least of the species?
That's a good point. That's a good
Yeah.
point. Yeah.
So I would definitely agree with you there. I definitely think that anti-Black racism is definitely a contributing factor to the disproportionate rates in all different levels: mental health, medical health,
Mm-hmm.
just wealth, education, and everything. And I'll just tell you from a mental health point of view, um, 1 in 3 Black adults with mental illness actually receive treatment, which
Oh,
is not, which is a
Well,
very low
no.
that's very low. Yeah, yeah.
percentage. Also, 25% of Black people seek treatment compared to 40% of the white people that seek treatment.
Right.
10% of Black people do not have health insurance, compared to only 5% of non-Hispanic white people more likely to, and also Black people are more likely to get treatment in an ER
Yes,
Mhm.
yes.
versus a mental health professional, which you're going to get completely kind of different types of service.
Yeah, yeah.
But I will say that some of the barriers to African Americans getting mental health treatment, I think it's all related back to anti-Black racism.
Yeah.
So for instance, one of the major barriers is money and insurance.
Yeah.
As I said, only about 10% of our oh, 10% of Black people do not have health insurance. So that's, and you need health insurance
Yeah, you
in
do.
order,
Yeah.
because without health insurance, it's like $200 to meet with with a mental health professional, which is just unreasonable if you don't have health insurance. And then also just the money. So that's one. And we already know that Black adults living under the poverty line are more than twice as likely to report serious psychological distress. And we know that our people are disproportionately impacted by poverty. So,
That's
of course,
right.
that would be
That's right.
linked there.
Yeah, yeah.
And then also just the stigma. There was a study that was done that showed 63% of African Americans believe that a mental health condition is a sign of personal weakness.
Yeah.
And then if you think about it from a faith-based standpoint, unfortunately, and I'm excited that I think probably within the last 10 years or so, or maybe I'm being a little too generous, but I'll say 10 years ago, we've talked more about mental health in the church space.
Yeah.
Because like I said earlier, I do think that we also can contribute to that stigma, as putting the stigma as, oh, if you're depressed, you just have really low faith, and it's a sin and all this other stuff. So that I think that can also contribute to the stigma. And then also lack of cultural sensitivity. So as I said before, where I was working, our population was mostly Black male youth,
Yes,
but the
yes.
clinicians were mostly all white women.
That's the point, I think.
That's something.
That is the point, because we like and I call it relatable care.
Of course, yeah.
Those who can relate to situations like ours.
That's important.
Because just to go to a person just because they have the degree or whatever out of Harvard or whatever, but it doesn't relate to us, then that's just like nil. We don't. It's not affecting our particular situation. And until we understand and begin to treat ourselves as uniquely different from anyone else, then we were going to always miss the point. And so when our folk do go to the mental health professionals, sometimes they're not satisfied with what because they are still confronting racism from a position that sometimes they don't even think we have any issues of mental illness. They call it criminal or whatever the case may be, and that shows in the treatment that they give certain ones of us.
And I think it's a cultural aspect of it too, because they're coming from a different culture, a different set of particulars. And it's interesting because we're talking about Black males, but also I think we can't leave with the Black females. There's a book out that just came out now called By the Time You Read This, The Space Between Chesley Smile and Mental Illness. And it's by a young lady named Chesley Chris, who committed suicide. And she began this book by the time you read this, and her mother, April Simpkins, finished the book. So I'm saying now we know what the Black youth need, the male aspect of it, but what should we be giving the Black young female? What should she be getting at mental?
Yeah, and so Black women are also at a disproportionate, rate of mental health illness as well. And I think when we were talking about like the stigma, I think also too, just this idea of the strong Black woman.
Oh, yes,
right? So we never want to be perceived as weak, and it's expected of us to carry the weight of our communities, carry the weight of our families. And if you need help, no, you're supposed to be strong. We're independent. We don't need nobody. We can do it ourselves, all of this stuff. So I think that also can also be a barrier. And people have done studies on that. And And there's a lot more studies coming out because
Yeah.
we're getting more African Americans in this field,
Yes,
Exactly.
yes, yes.
that can speak to the things that we're talking about. I'm sure other people probably don't
That's
even
right.
know this strong Black woman mantra, or they wouldn't even think that it matters,
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
right?
right.
Yeah.
And so it is exciting to know that we do have more mental health professionals, especially in the research
Yes,
space,
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
doing
Yeah.
this work for us.
And it's not that
Um,
we haven't had them
Mhm.
before, but they're just being ignored. And
That's
now
right,
I
right.
think
yeah,
it's a new day
It's a
where
new
our
day.
people are demanding attention,
Yes. Oh, yeah.
because we
Yeah, we are.
certainly had Dr. Frances Cress Wilson, and the Cress papers, and she did a
Of course. Of
tremendous
course.
job,
Oh, yeah.
a phenomenal job,
Yeah,
in
yeah.
trying to understand us and explain us in the frame of this racism and white
That's
supremacy.
right. Right. Right.
And then there was Dr. Grew, who
That's
does
right.
the Joy Grew,
Mm-hmm.
the Grew,
You grew.
who wrote the book Post Traumatic Slave
Yes.
Syndrome,
Yes. Yes.
and
yep,
that's basically the gist of our situation in terms of our mental health.
Mhm.
It comes from that slave period
Mhm.
where we were abused
That's right,
and not tended to and treated unfairly,
That's right. Right.
and all that have clogged our mind. And one of the things that I know, and this is just an observation from an amateur, but with our young people
Mhm.
having now involving themselves in suicide or whatever, or much on a higher level
yeah,
than
yeah,
before,
yeah.
I just kind of suspect it has something to do with our being the generations prior,
Yeah.
being being more familiar with our situation.
Right. 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 Right.
Less out of closer to slavery,
Yeah.
and less away from the total history of what we went through.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
particularly since when you think about the history that's not being taught to our people now, and that little bit that was in the school being taken away,
Yeah. Of course.
then our
Of course.
young people are just void of all that would make them who they are or not who they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they're feeling very bad about themselves. They're feeling very negligent. They're feeling that they are not worthy of being here. That's my opinion
Yeah,
of it.
yeah.
But that's why I want to keep us always understanding that there's a beginning, and the beginning was slavery, and whatever's happened to us in that period,
Yes,
we got
yeah.
to work from that position.
Yeah.
And that way our young people will know that no, just because people look at you and credit you as being evil or
Whatever.
criminal,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
whatever, it's not what your nature is. And you would maybe a little bit out of sync on some things because we have not been able to educate you to confirm your greatness, to confirm that who you are, and because you are not, it has to do with racism and white supremacy, because that's the basis of our problem in this particular country, I believe.
Yeah, but I think we're becoming more aware, and wouldn't you say that social media may have helped in this? Because sometimes social media can be a negative influence, but can you see social media as maybe a positive influence in this situation?
yeah. So, and I actually, in one of my classes, I had to do a little bit of work and research in this area. And while they were able to find, some positives for social media, especially during the pandemic, when people were experiencing isolation.
Yes.
And so, it's nice to feel connected, but at the same time, I think we all know about the negative
Yeah.
effects of
We do.
social media. And so I do think that social media can impact, self-esteem, and all of those things, because you're kind of looking at these ideal pictures and all of this stuff. And then also with social media, which, definitely impacts at least our youth, is the cyberbullying, as that's been on the rise. And, outside of just social media, but just technology, with sexting and like all of these different things where, back in the day, people weren't recording your mistakes. People weren't
Exactly.
taking pictures of you when, whatever you were doing. And now those things don't go away. Like if you put something on social media, even if you delete it, somebody either screenshotted it or,
That's it.
it can be
It's just
found. But
forever.
I did want to go back to something that you had shared, Ruby, about the racial trauma. And that's definitely real, and trauma can definitely move through generations, as I believe that it has moved in our community. And so I remember in one of my earlier classes, I think it was probably for biopsychology, but I think this kind of blends well with Dr. Joy uh
DeGraw,
DeGray, is that her
DeGraw,
name? Yeah. Her work, and Dr. Alvin Francis Poissant, who was, I think he was he's a psychiatrist, but I think he was the
yeah,
first one
Poussin.
to introduce the post-traumatic slave syndrome before she expanded it.
Mm-hmm.
But so I remember we learned about somebody named Carrie Russler and Brian Diaz. They're neurobiologists. And so what they did was they were interested in they were looking at if they were looking at trauma and inheritance of things through generations. And so what they did was they took mice and they would release this scent,
Yeah.
and once they smelled it, they would shock them. They would shock the mice, and so they just kept doing it repeatedly to the point where just them smelling it, the mice began to, I don't know how they were able to find out, but they were able to see that the mice were in distress. They had
Right.
anxiety. They were
the scent of
traumatized
it,
by
yeah.
the scent, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
And then so what they did was then they looked at the children of the mice. They never shocked them, but they had them in there. They put the scent out, and they noticed that that the children of those mice also reacted in the same way,
Yeah.
which really kind of also connects to this idea that trauma, that our experiences of our ancestors
Yeah.
can impact us today.
And it does.
Also something else that I did not
Oh my goodness,
mention, because I was going to go through the whole list of causes for mental illness, but we didn't get through it. But one of the causes of mental illness is also genetics. So major kind of mood disorders like depression and anxiety, those can be genetic. And also mental illness like schizophrenia can be genetic. For example, if you are depressed, I mean, if you have a sibling or a parent that is diagnosed with depression, your likelihood of also becoming depressed is twice or sometimes triple likely to happen to you.
Understandable.
So there definitely is a connection between the genetics and the fact that trauma can move through generations. And so I just wanted to
Right.
lift that up.
Yeah. Good. And there was an experience pastor brought forward a couple of months ago, and just made the point about how we can be influenced. We are influenced by present day
Of course.
action.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Talked about the black man, and there was a study done recently. See, we have not had a lot of study done on us. That's why I say in my book I talk about the two words that I just refuse to use. Or not refuse to use, but we have to clarify.
Made them clear what it means.
Excuse and explanation.
That's right.
Excuse.
Two different things.
We never really, as African people, should use the word excuse because we have never been studied enough to know where there's excuse and explanation.
Yeah.
So we have an explanation behind what we do.
That's right.
Don't mean
That's
that
right.
we're going to accept it. Just we know it's an explanation.
Yes.
White folks have an excuse because they have no reason in this world not to achieve what they want to achieve. I don't care where they come from, they can achieve it if they apply themselves. So theirs is an excuse, ours is an explanation.
Yeah.
But back to what the pastor said, he said there was a study done, I don't know how long ago or whatever, but I had not heard about it before.
Yeah.
Where he was saying about, a study was done about how black men, I think, or just black people in general, was more more subject to have physical problems than white people were. One of the reasons, he was given an example, and there's it was a study done on how black men, if they are riding at night, 12 o'clock at night, so minding their business or whatever the case may be, and they happen to look in their rear view mirror and there's a light flashing behind them, immediately they go into some kind of mode
Mm.
Oh, of
because
course,
it
yeah, yeah.
implies a whole lot of stuff.
Of course it does.
There's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
policeman. I don't know how I'm gonna get out of here. I may be dead before I,
Yeah, yeah. What
that
if
kind of stuff. When a
it's
white person look
traumatic?
at that same situation
Mm-hmm,
and be relaxed because they know the likelihood of them being stopped or being harassed
yeah,
or
yeah.
being whatever the case may be is a minimum to none.
Yeah, because they see it as help is on the way.
Help is on the way.
We see it as
It's a
trauma's on the
threat.
way.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
coming.
and there's also, I mean, even outside of just the generational trauma that our people have experienced,
Hmm.
just the impact of, and I'm thinking about back to 2020, which is not to say that it was, it was 2020 when police started shooting unarmed
It
black
didn't
people.
start
That's
there.
been a thing, right? But
Yeah.
I
Right,
think
right.
that the media, it was everywhere. And so
Hmm.
there's also this trauma of just witnessing it, of
Yeah,
just seeing
sure.
these images
That's
over
right.
and
That's right.
over again and
Yeah,
hearing
yeah.
about each and every
Yeah,
one of them.
yeah,
And so I definitely do, which is why I'm not surprised that while everybody else seemed to be, cool, our mental health was depleting
Yeah,
yeah.
yes, yeah,
around
yeah.
that time
Yes,
as
yes,
well.
Yes,
yes,
yes.
yes.
Well, let me. Do you see? Are you confident? Are you encouraged that we're on a right track for what we need specifically? Because see, a lot of us are still under the impression that our stuff is just the same as anyone else, and we're just making excuses, and all we need to do is pick our stuff up by our bootstraps and all them straps that we don't
Yeah, we don't
have.
have.
You know.
Yeah.
So, do you see that we need special type of people who will get a special type of understanding of what we need specifically as African
Yeah.
people, in opposed to the general population?
Yes,
So we
yes.
got a lot of mental health people
Yeah.
out there,
But we
but
need
like
something
you say, they're
specific,
not
though.
specific
Yeah,
for us.
specific.
And but do you see that change? And I'm praying and
Yeah.
hoping.
Yeah, I do. I think we have a very long way to go.
Hmm.
But I do think that we are moving in the right
Yeah.
direction where people weren't even talking about it. We're at least talking about it now.
Right.
Yeah, that's
But
good.
what I
That's good.
don't want to happen is that this is just kind of a fad or a
Hmm.
trend,
Right.
right? Because back in 2020, everybody had Black Lives Matter
Hmm.
posters
Yeah, I remember
everywhere.
that.
All
Yes,
of the
yes, yeah, yeah,
companies were,
yeah.
oh, we love Black people and oh, we're so sorry for everything we've done and all this
Right.
stuff. But
Right.
then
And you
now
see what happened.
So
everybody's
fade
fine
away,
with them
fade
taking
away.
Black history out of our schools
Yes,
and
Yeah.
all of this
accepted.
stuff. So
Banning
there was just
books. Yeah.
so clearly caring about Black people was just a trend in the 2020 time. And I don't
Yeah.
want that to be the same for here for mental health because I
Right.
do notice that a lot more churches are talking about mental health, a lot
Yes.
more people are trying to talk about mental health. And I just don't want it to be, a cool thing to now talk about, but we
Right,
Exactly.
right, right.
actually take what we're talking about in this presentation to actually turn it to actual boots on the ground where
That's
we
right.
Yes.
That's
are
important.
investing in our students, especially students that are going to be in mental health. I didn't talk about this before, but also the lack of Black therapists is
Yeah.
also a barrier.
Yes,
Sure it
yes,
is.
As they're
yes.
only 4% of psychologists are Black,
Mm.
Oh
only
my goodness.
2% of
Goodness.
psychiatrists, those are people that distribute medication, are
Right.
Black.
Mm-hmm.
22% of social workers are
Wow.
Black, and 11% of professional counselors are Black. So we still have a long way to go, as we had talked about. And I, try to help people all the time, trying to connect with mental health professionals,
Hmm.
and they're definitely looking for people that look like them.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
And we
yes.
kind of already talked about the cultural sensitivity. I also believe that that's also linked to our just overall mistrust
Mhm.
of mental health professionals and
That's
medical
right. Right.
professionals.
Yeah, of
We
course.
do know
Yeah.
like think about the Tuskegee experiment
That's
Right.
right.
and
Right.
how
Exactly.
First
they
thing that
have
came to my
used
mind.
this
Yeah,
to
yeah.
harm us.
That's
So
right.
Yeah.
I
That's right.
understand why people can be hesitant to
Right.
go to
Of course.
to go to mental health professionals. And something interesting, I'm not sure if you all saw the movie Get Out.
Yes, yes, so that.
Yes. But so what I thought was
Yeah.
interesting is that there was a part of it that I think kind of played into this mistrust of
Hmm.
mental health professionals
Mhm.
because the mother, the white woman, was a mental health professional,
Yeah.
but she was hypnotizing the main character and
Yes,
doing
yes.
all of these things. And I think that kind of speaks to true feelings
Yeah.
about for our people when they go into mental health spaces that,
Yeah.
we're going to be drugging them up. We're going to
Right.
be doing all like trying to
Yeah,
manipulate
yeah,
their
yeah,
minds and
of
all of
course.
that stuff,
Yeah.
which I completely understand because America has shown time and
Mm-hmm.
time again that when you're trying to offer help, you're not really trying to help us.
Right,
So I, so I,
exactly.
I definitely get
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And those that
But
are not deliberately doing it, they really just don't know how to connect.
That's right.
I
They
mean,
don't.
they're in denial themselves about what racism and white
That's right.
supremacy
That's
have
right. Yeah,
done.
yeah,
And
yeah.
if you think about it, some of our folks, well, we are not so much removed from understanding it now.
No, no.
But this President Obama, when he came on the scene, and we all thought that the racism was over, post-racist society,
Yeah, yeah,
didn't want to
yeah.
even hear it.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's understandable too,
It
because
is,
when you
yeah.
get a
Well, enough
person
is
in the
enough.
position
Yeah.
that we're in, and you're so traumatized
That's right. Oh, yeah.
over the years, and my good friend Dr. Carl Falling say, I used to say brainwashing, he say brain dirtying.
Right, right.
Your
Yeah.
brain has been so dirty
That's right. Yeah.
over time that you don't want to even hear anything other than you're just like the average person. We're not
course,
like the
yeah,
average
yeah,
person. We
yeah,
got to get that out of our mind.
yeah,
We are
yeah.
people who have been so traumatized. Two of the things that make us different.
Yes.
One is the
Makes it
stripping.
unique.
Uniquely different from any other people that was enslaved.
That's
We
right.
were stripped of so much of our being. We were stripped of our religion. We were stripped of our history. We were stripped of our culture. We were stripped of our music. We were stripped of everything.
Everything. Yeah.
In addition, the second thing is that we were so traumatized with the physical condition that we went through.
Yes.
So when those things happen, we we have a different mindset. We're coming from a different space.
That's
Until
right.
we understand that, all our folks get around us, the three folks I talk about, the psychologist, the mental health professional, the historian, and the biblical person, not necessarily biblical, I mean the faith-based people who believe that there's a greater being than ourselves, get together on that to kind of get to us as African people, because ours are so different. And I believe that's going to happen. Going to get to a point where we realize we can't rely on people who have no reason, first of all,
Right.
to be concerned with our well-being.
Yeah.
And sometimes they really don't, they innocently don't know,
They don't know.
how
They don't know.
to help us, help ourselves.
Yeah.
We got to be the ones that get together with the ones of us who know, the ones that the newer generation, for one thing.
Yeah.
Secondly, even some of the old generation, there were Dr. John Henry Clark and Dr. Jeffries
Yes,
and the rest of them that knew
our
what
elders back then,
our
yeah.
elders. So I don't want to dismiss them,
Yeah,
but they've got to be a coming together that know we got to create something different.
Yes.
Think in
yeah,
terms of we got to create something different to help our people get through a situation that is so uniquely different from anything else that has ever happened. But I'm just confident in folks like you, Dr. K, that we're going to help us keep this thing and help define just what we need to bring us through. Because that's going to, over time, some of us just don't know.
That's right.
Just don't really know that there's a difference in what we got to have than what other folks. And when we get the same thing and don't come out differently, we'll say, oh, well, I went to Harvard, I went to Yale, I went to where, but you're still suffering from something so different.
And the thing is, with people like yourself, that's why we have you come on so you can share this information with us. And also, Art, we have people who are not in the studio but are listening in. And we like to acknowledge them as well.
I'm going to acknowledge my folks now. Prince Charles Chaka Shiver, thank you. Robert, I see you watching. Lloyd Shiver, see you. Thank you. Shalonda, keep watching and keep supporting us. Jabbar, my nephew down in North Carolina, all these folks in North Carolina, Georgia from California, Andrea, Tanisha, and Home, Clifford, Home. All these are from Lake Butler, Florida. I'm talking about Lake Butler. Lula, Salvador, Rashida Johnson, Walter Shivers, all the way from California. That's my son. A treat. Chattel slavery. Well, that's slavery too, but I mean, we were in such a different type of slavery. Sharon and Celine Waller. Okay, keep watching. Altrick Atkins. All right, let me see what that says. In sports, the mental game is respected on a high level, but when it comes to life being mental, when it comes to us, it's being considered crazy by us, which shows we have mental issues in itself. Collectively, we have never been had treatment for the war that had been waged against us overall for hundreds of years. That's what we say. That's why we got to see it. So, and for most people, they are held captive or kidnapped for a certain amount of time is going to be mentally traumatized, let alone 400 years. Well, it shows you, I tell people now, God brings me examples to present to you all, but I can't explain it myself from a mental perspective. He showed me when the Israeli incident there with the Palestinians. And when the first hostages came back, they were not calling for celebrity or famous people or any, the president. They called for people who would ask specific to that particular situation. The mental health people, they wanted to meet those folks before they even touched bases with anybody else, even their family. So now with our situation, we're twice, 3 times, 4 times worse than any other incidents in the history of the world, any that I've read about or heard about, then why should we think we don't need that specific type of understanding or treatment?
We do. And maybe, because, we get into this conversation, and we have about like 5 minutes to wrap things up. But again, I want to thank you for joining us. Ruby, is there anything you want to
No, but I want you to hear some. If you got some other information for us, Dr. K, just bring it on. We want to have you back, too. We want to have you back.
I just have a number of different things. But I also just wanted to lift up some of the mistrust, too, is that they have found in the pediatric realm, so with mental health in Black children, that Black children right now are more likely to be diagnosed with disruptive disorders, such as oppositional defiant disorder, which is ODD, while white children are more likely to be diagnosed with ADHD, which is more of a more welcome diagnosis. Many of and also too, our children are heavily medicated. That's not to say that some children don't need to be on medication, but we are much more heavily medicated. So there are some issues there. So we definitely have a lot of work to do. But I'm excited to see, especially like spaces like this, because you are bringing it to light. You have listeners, and maybe those listeners can tell other people. And so we can start to really learn more about mental health and really take it seriously. And it also will end the stigma so that we can invest more in our researchers, because we already talked about that. We can invest more so that we make sure that we have more Black mental health professionals. And then, just also
that's important.
I think also too, from a faith-based space, I would also like us to really build out a mental health theology, and make that more, at the forefront, instead of us being wearing masks all the time, blessed and highly favored, right? But you can be blessed and highly favored and still be depressed.
That's
you
right.
can be blessed and have, you know what I mean? So, I definitely am excited about what First Baptist Church of Lincoln Gardens is doing, and I know other churches are also doing it. A couple of people have called me to ask me about, what we're doing, because they want to start a mental health ministry at their church. And so I definitely think, and although there are a number of the Black church is not perfect, but we are still kind of a really major part of but we're still a major part of the community. And so I definitely think that the Black church should be one of the leaders in this space as well, as far as ending the stigma.
Yes, again,
I'm excited to see what's going to happen, and I really have high hopes for our community. And I wish, my hope and my prayer is that we can get to a space where more of us are healed. And don't feel shamed about looking for the help that we need.
Well, once we understand the connection from whence it came. See, we're under the impression that this is just upon us because we are these kind of people. That's why I say it's so important for the history to come about, so we'll know that there's a history behind how we got here. Otherwise, we're just going to continue to block it off from the reality of life. And it is a reality that we have a mental system, the same as a physical system that needs attention at certain times of our life, and ours is more specific. So yeah, I'm confident. I am very confident that that's going to happen because I see it. I'm going to continue to talk about it. Sometimes people are a little bit confused when I say I'm an unapologetic amateur looking for experts in Africanism. I mean that specifically because I'm determined, and that till we accept the fact that our situation is uniquely different from anyone else's, we are going to miss the point, and we cannot afford to miss the point. I see that they're running me out of here, so I'm so pleased. I want to have you back, Dr. K, Reverend K, as soon as we can.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, thanks for coming on.
Okay, God bless.
God bless you.